of the 12 amazing northern suburbs and the northern part of our county here in Hamilton County. So it goes from Forest Park over to Montgomery, dips down because of gerrymandering, and picks up Madeira, Deer Park, Reading, Evendale, Glendale, and Green Hills. So I have all the dales, including Springdale, Blue Ash, Sharonville, and Sycamore Township as well. And I'm currently serving in my 3rd term in the Ohio State House, which means I'm in my 5th year. And I also serve my caucus as the Democratic whip for the Ohio House Democrats. Serving currently on the Constitutional Resolutions Committee, which I think is going to be a big topic of discussion for tonight, as well as I'll be subbing in on the Government Oversight Committee, both tomorrow at 10 a.m. and Wednesday at 10 a.m., where we will be discussing the proposal to bring back an August election, even though my Republican supermajority colleagues got rid of those August special elections last December. So I'll leave it at that. I'm sure most of you all know kind of my personal story, but if you want me to go deeper into that, I can, Dan. Otherwise, I'll kick it over to Rep. Baker.
That's good.
Hello, sorry I was a few minutes late. I was having computer login issues. My name is Rachel Baker. I am a brand new representative. I represent the 27th district, which is the east side suburbs of Cincinnati. So everything from Loveland, Sims Township, Indian Hill, Terrace Park, Anderson, Mount Lookout, Hyde Park, and then a little into the city with Evanston and Avondale and East Walnut Hills. So just starting my 1st term, learning a lot from our great caucus leadership, and Rep. Miranda has been a great mentor. My background is I'm a nurse, a PhD prepared nurse researcher. So I serve on all 3 of the health committees, public health policy, health providers, and behavioral health. And then also on tech and innovation, and on aviation and aerospace. That's my wild card. So thanks for having me tonight.
Great. Thank you and welcome. I'll go ahead and ask the first question and get us started here. And yes, HJR1 is a big issue with us, obviously, and all the, like you called it yourself, Jessica, the shenanigans that are going on with that. And there's going to be a lot more before it's all over, I'm sure. But you were saying that they will be holding testimony for the companion bill, House Bill 144, tomorrow for it, and then Thursday against it. So if people saw that link on that. Realistically, what do you think will happen with that? Can you give us an idea?
Well, that's a complicated question and answer, because I don't know if I deal in realistics here in the State House. I think, not to be funny, but, Rep. Baker would probably agree with me. It's not really all that logical or pragmatic how we deal with things here in the state legislature. And that is, of course, because we have such an unbalanced formula, if you will, in so many things, but particularly the partisan makeup of our state, or the folks serving in our state house chambers. We are, if you follow me on social media, you probably saw that I posted the ways in which, or the directions, if you would like to come and oppose, you can either submit written testimony only, or you can come up and join us in Columbus if you so choose, to give your verbal testimony against House Bill 144. The opponent testimony, where you have the opportunity to do that, will be on Thursday at 10 a.m. And then tomorrow, Wednesday at 10 a.m. is the proponent testimony, the 1 or 2 people that may be coming in talking about why they need to subvert democracy in Ohio, and deny women and girls everywhere and pregnant people all across the state their rights to reproductive freedom. Because that is, in essence, what this is all about, right? This is all about the fact that there is a significant group of physicians across the state who have band together and worked their arses off to try to get on the ballot reproductive freedom because of the onslaught of attacks from the supermajority to try to legislate away our rights as women and pregnant people across the state to do what we know is right for our bodies and our reproductive care in those most personal moments. Maybe when our lives are at stake, maybe when, and just to remind you, the heartbeat bill that was passed in 2019 in the Ohio State House has no exceptions for rape, no exceptions for incest, no exceptions for the life of the mother. And thank God we have a judge in Hamilton County, Judge Christian Jenkins, who has held this up in court and has not allowed it to be enacted here in our state. But there's a significant amount of healthcare professionals out there who are working really, really hard to enshrine these freedoms in our Ohio Constitution, because that is what Ohioans have had since 1912. Direct access to their constitution when the lawmakers whom we elect in very gerrymandered districts aren't fulfilling their duty of what the will of the people is, not the minority of people, but the will of the majority of the people is not being fulfilled here in Ohio. So all HJR 1, SJR 2, House Bill 144, and whatever the Senate bill number version of House Bill 144 is just a way to subvert democracy, get out in front of this reproductive freedom amendment that we may have before us on the November ballot, and try to stop it by initiating minority rule here in Ohio and making 40% or less of the population, because we know turnout is another issue here in Ohio, decide the will of the majority. So it would take us away from the ideal of one person, one vote to a minority rule here in Ohio.
It's terrible. Rachel, anything you would add to that?
No, I think she summarized it pretty well. And I think the biggest learning I've had being brand new to this is I keep trying to bring data and reason, and people are like, we're not dealing in that conversation, which is frustrating.
Oh my.
But yeah.
Not quite what you expected. Huh? That's too bad. Greg, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, and I think Brewster's trying to raise his hand as well, maybe next. But anyway,
Okay.
my question is to both of you, thanks for coming to speak to us and taking time out of your schedules. I thought that the reason that the Speaker of the House was elected was because he had promised that he wasn't going to bring this to the floor for a vote. So were we just outwitted, or were there no guarantees, or are there no guarantees that we could have done to make sure that he fulfilled his promise when we elected him Speaker of the House?
I'll take this one, Rep. Baker, since I was directly involved in those, negotiations. I will say that there was never one thing that was promised to us that we negotiated with the Speaker. And in all honesty, this has not made it to the House floor yet. So there is a silver lining and something to be hopeful for. Because if he really wanted to, he could have brought it to the floor way before now. They have a deadline of May 10th or 11th that they have to pass this in order to get that August ballot to become a reality, or that August election to become a reality. So of course, our goal is to hold it back that long, just like we held it back that long to prevent it getting on the primary ballot here in May. And that deadline was March something, but we've been fighting this good fight alongside our coalition government that we have built here in Ohio, which, mind you, is only in the House chamber. This same reality is not in the Senate chamber. So the Senate has already passed these measures at their version, SJR 2 and whatever the number is that's the companion bill to House Bill 144. However, in the House, it is still in the committee. House Bill 144 is that we are debating this week. So it's still going through the legislative process. Our colleagues in the, what I refer to as the extremist caucus, did not manage to get the number of signatures they needed to bring forth House Joint Resolution 1 to the floor through their discharge petition. Last time I checked, it was only 29 of their representatives that signed on to that. So that indicates to us that they themselves don't even have the votes. Knock on wood, we're hoping that's where that remains, but there are no guarantees. This is game time politics. This is every single day we are fighting to ensure that it remains one person, one vote here in Ohio. And we got to get creative, and we have successfully not allowed it to get on May's ballot, and now we're fighting to not allow the August ballot to become reality, especially when day in and day out we're calling them out on their hypocrisy that they took this away in December, and now here we are trying to bring it back again for August and waste millions of taxpayer dollars.
And Brewster.
First of all, it's great to be with two of my favorite legislators and wonderful people. Hey, help me understand who are, if there are any, statewide organized organizations who A, intend to endorse this, and B, fund the campaign to pass it. I mean, in other words, who are we going to be fighting against in August, other than the legislators themselves who put it on the ballot?
Go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, you want to go?
No, you go ahead.
Oh, I mean, Rep. Miranda will know better than me, but the biggest people that I've seen really coming out in this is the Ohio Right to Life. I mean, I think it's, they're couching it in this, protecting our Constitution or whatever they're saying, but it's right to life, I think. And that's who has been testifying as proponents to it. So I think that's going to be the battle. And there's been multiple. Rep. Miranda and I were at a meeting with the Realtor Association Architect Association in Cincinnati yesterday, and they have written in and are really opposed to it. So really, almost every group I've spoken to is against it. The only thing I've seen coming out strongly for it is the Right to Life group. But there might be others. Rep. Miranda would know.
Yeah, I mean, Brewster, that's it. It's at this point, it's just Ohio Right to Life. And there's this new group that came in to testify to the Constitutional Resolutions Committee last week called End Abortion Ohio or something like that. A special interest group I have never heard of. But at this point, it is, Mike Gonadakis and the folks at Ohio Right to Life. They're trying to subvert democracy as we know in Ohio, all in an explicit and transparent attempt to take away women and pregnant people's rights to reproductive freedom.
So you haven't seen any evidence of the state chamber or local business groups weighing in at all, right?
No, and we actually pointed that out in committee several times as well, because something that you all should know and should be talking about very loudly in your networks is the fact that this is going to ruin bond levies, school levies, county mental health levies, public library levies, great parks levies, every community levy you can think of as we know it under House Joint Resolution 1 or Senate Joint Resolution 2 would have to pass with a 60% +1 threshold in Ohio.
So I'm sorry, I didn't get that. That's astounding. So you got to think that every superintendent, school board, mental health, elderly services, they would all be totally freaking out, because unless it's a straight renewal, you almost never get 60+.
Right.
So,
and that is why the unions are coming out very strongly. And, the problem, Brewster, is we had over 121 people and organizations that were there to testify that day in opposition to HJR 1. And the chairman cut off after I think we maybe heard from 7 folks, and then he cut off testimony for the rest of the folks that were there to testify. And so, that's, they don't want to hear from the people. They don't want to hear from the business leaders, the labor leaders, and everyone that this would affect. They just want to jam through what they want to do to keep a hold of the harnesses of power that they hold on so tightly.
Great.
That's what really struck me with that architect meeting. I wasn't thinking we were even going to touch HJR 1. It's everybody I've met with is opposed to it, and bring up things that I hadn't even realized it would impact. I mean, so everybody's opposed to it. So it's a huge waste of money, even if it doesn't pass. I think there'll be a lot of work and a lot of people that will be campaigning a no campaign, but the fact that we need to pay $20 million for a statewide election with that being the only thing on it, and we need to pay for a no campaign and make sure people vote, just distracts away from things we could be funding and doing.
And Lucy, I see you have your hand up, but I just
Yeah,
want to add
Lucy.
one more point to this.
Okay.
The biggest argument they have for House Joint Resolution 1 or Senate Joint Resolution 2 is that they don't want quote unquote special interest groups meddling in our Constitution. They don't want outside special interest groups coming in and, you know, thwarting the appetite of the voters and putting on the constitutional amendments. Well, guess what? If they really cared about corruption, A, that's never happened. We've never had outside of Ohio special interests come in and try to do constitutional amendments. But B, if they really cared about outside special interest groups and dark money funneling into Ohio to run for or against campaigns, then they'd pass a Democratic bill called the Ohio Corruption Act, which is House Bill 112, that myself and Representative Bride Sweeney have introduced for the 5th time now here in the State House to try to get that passed. So that is the biggest argument that they have, and the argument that we are so very used to countering with, you know, that's not really what this is about. Because if it really was, you'd pass the Ohio Anti-Corruption Act and bring all dark money to light.
And I bet they'll get most of the money to try to pass this issue from out of state entrance.
That's right. The folks who are going to be coming in here to pass it will be none other than Koch brother money organizations like American Heritage and the like.
Right. Okay, Lucy, go ahead.
Jessica and Rachel, thank you so much for coming. And thanks for the work that you do. I was reading also that, and I don't know this group, the Buckeye Firearms Association was a proponent of House Joint Resolution. Is that a big group? I don't even know. And then my second question is, what do we need to do? I feel like I'm banging my head against the wall. My 2 reps are Democrats and they're like, yeah, we know we're against this, but what else can we do? So those are 2 questions.
So the Buckeye Firearms Association is kind of like Ohio's mini NRA, except with the caveat that they are much more extreme, much more active in social media, and much more present on the ground here in Capitol Square. And because our Republican colleagues are used to running in these very hyper-partisan gerrymandered districts, that's the only folks they have to cater to, right? Is just those 2 groups, Ohio Right to Life and the Buckeye Firearms Association. And as long as they cater to those 2 organizations, and AFP, let's throw in there Americans for Prosperity. As long as they cater to these 3 organizations, then they're golden in their district and they can stay in office and wreak all the extremist havoc they want to wreak. So
it doesn't seem like an issue. I don't get it, except the Firearms Association's against reproductive rights, or?
Well, that's the picture that I tried to paint for them in committee last week. That's that clip that went viral, essentially, where we were asking them that. You know, it's already been stated time and time again in these very committee hearings what this is about. So you mean to tell me you're standing here on behalf of all of the members of the Ohio or the Buckeye Firearms Association and telling me that they all support this? And he literally said in committee, well, I haven't surveyed all of my members. I don't even know how many members we have in the Buckeye Firearms Association, so I can't really tell you that. So this is the kind of caliber of folks we're dealing with.
Okay.
It's
But
difficult.
I think there is an argument that, you know, the current legislation we have is going to put no restrictions on guns. The only way we're going to have any restrictions on guns that I see in the near future is with a citizen-led ballot initiative. So I think that there is, in a place that's gerrymandered and where the representatives have a really different view on gun safety than the majority of Ohioans, I think potentially they could have a legitimate concern that there could be a future ballot initiative on gun safety, you know, even safe storage or some sort of low hanging fruit in gun safety could be a valid initiative so I think that would be my thought on why they are, but that's just my Rachel Baker thought.
That's very true. And to your point, Lucy, about what more you can do. I mean, listen, I'm very proud of the fact that we have flipped 2 red seats blue in Hamilton County, and we now hold the majority Democrats of our 7 in Hamilton County. So I'm glad that your rep and your senator are already Democrat and they see eye to eye. So don't ever not reach out to them just because of that. They need to hear it again and again and again so that they can use that in examples in all of our, legislative processes like committees and things. But what you can do is submit written testimony for Thursday. You can get involved, with the Columbus piece of this legislative process and make your voice heard, either by coming up here and testifying or by just sending in written testimony. Other things you can do is write op-eds to the local newspaper, get that heard. There's a lot of folks op-eds surrounding the topics of HJR1 and SJR2 being published all around Ohio. The more the merrier. And on social media, I think, sometimes we forget to acknowledge the power of social media, and it has to connect people to what's going on. For instance, the greatest example was last week where my clip in Constitutional Resolutions Committee went viral, of me sticking it to the Cincinnati Right to Life lady because she's absolutely insane. So, we rely on that, right? Because we've had such a defunding of local publicity, or newspapers and publications. People aren't getting their information from the newspaper. People aren't getting their information from the radio. They're not getting it from all of those normal places we would get information. They are getting it from social media, and we have to be loud and we have to be proud of our democratic values and continue to make those posts all over social media and tell people what's going on, share the articles, and hopefully get some of your friends and family involved as well.
Let me say real quick, Jessica mentioned early on that she may have to leave at 7:30. So if you have a question specifically for her, go ahead and raise your hand quickly. Greg?
So I did not know about the levy information. So that's great to know that it has to now pass by 60% if this one goes through. Is there anything else like that we should know? I thought that one of you had said there were other things that are kind of hidden under the weeds here. If there's anything else that we should know about the bill.
Well, that's kind of the only thing that's hidden that they weren't highlighting or talking about, right? Because they don't want to alarm the business community or the labor community that, bonds may come into question here in Ohio. And that's the ugliest part of this bill. Well, not the ugliest. The ugliest is that they're trying to dismantle democracy. But this is another horrible piece of the bill that is, it may have been an unintended consequence, but it is very much so a consequence of this bill that we should be loud about, and that we have been doing our due diligence and highlighting and talking about up here at the State House.
Hey, Sue? You're on mute, Sue.
Okay, I'm wondering about the chamber. It seems to me that the Chamber of Commerce, as Republican as they have been, this is an issue that would bring them around, because it hurts business and their ability to attract talent. So have you had any communication with the chamber leadership?
Yes, and not just the Ohio Chamber of Commerce, but the NFIB, which is our organization that represents small businesses here in Ohio. Also the Ohio Business Roundtable, and several other business leaders, including labor leaders, because, sometimes labor leaders aren't classified in that same bin when they should be, especially the Ohio AFL-CIO and I forget the gentleman's the building trades, because they are the ones that build the schools, right? They're the ones that build these large bond projects that we pass through tax levies, and they have to be included in this conversation. And so those are actually the first folks that we went to ask them to come in and testify against. Unfortunately, not all of them got to testify against because the chairman cut off more than 100 people's testimonies and literally silenced all of their voices. So we are where we are, and we are asking them to be loud and make noise in other ways. Rep. Baker mentioned that a few of us from your Hamilton County delegation met with the Cincinnati chapter of the Ohio Architects Institute yesterday. They have a letter that they have been sending around to all representatives and senators of their strong opposition because architects are the ones that design the buildings for all of these school bond levies and other buildings that are being built, and it affects them directly as well. So we are looking at all different avenues and all different stakeholders and asking them to make their voice heard. It's just an unfortunate day in Ohio where a chairman can shut down over 100 testimonies and literally silence them from, making their voice heard. So now they just have to be sending these two folks emails and calling them. And that's why I said in the video that I posted, blow representatives up, blow their phones up, blow their emails up, everything we can do to make it very, very clear where we stand on this issue, which is wholeheartedly against this awful bill. And I just want to point out really quickly something that I just retweeted from one of our reporters up here on Cap Square. There are now more than 200 bipartisan groups that are against this, 4 bipartisan former governors, and Ohio's entire system of our bipartisan boards of elections in our 88 counties are against it. So everyone's making their voice loud and clear. And we just got to keep the pressure on to make sure that the supermajority doesn't pass this.
So can they cut off testimony on Thursday like they've done in the past?
They could, but we will absolutely fight to the last minute and throw a fit just like we did last week to make sure that people's voices are heard.
It's
When we
amazing.
submit-
I mean, I find this amazing. It's worse than I thought, and I thought it was pretty bad.
Yeah, which is why we need you all to help us amplify what's happening here, right? Because the silver lining of what's going on in Tennessee is that people are now paying attention to state houses more than they ever have. And if we continually highlight all of the heinous things that the supermajority is doing in the dark of night to the people of Ohio, then maybe we can start to move this wheel a little bit faster and get the kind of change we need to see in our next redistricting efforts.
Would they actually read the comments that are sent in? They cut off the testimonies, so.
I don't want to speak for my extremist colleagues, but I can tell you that here in the offices of the Great 28, we read every email, we answer every phone call.
Okay, great. It's fantastic. In terms of you mentioned, Rachel, that you're just finding it frustrated. They don't want to listen to reason, basically. Can you give us one of your most frustrating examples of that you've had?
I've been a little removed from all the HJR1. I've been seeing that secondhand, but I've got a front row seat to the health legislation that's been going on. So the anti-trans bills forbidding healthcare providers from providing gender-affirming care to minors. A bill today, I forget what it's called, but basically I think of it as the ivermectin bill to allow doctors to prescribe anything for anything. And I think it's just a different world. Like I've never been where I have to sit and respectfully listen to someone who's completely wrong in everything they're saying about doctors, about science, about how hospitals work. And it is amazing. So I've had some conversations with people kind of planning how to ask questions, especially, so like, for example, tomorrow we have the anti-gender affirming care proponent testimony. And so how do we ask questions to doctors who do not practice according to best practices, according to science, according to evidence, according to all major healthcare and medical organizations, but are standing up there saying all these organizations are wrong, they're all have been taken over by activists. I mean, I don't, and people are buying this, and I just never, it's very interesting. Like my thought is to like print every article and understand every piece of data, and they don't care because that's all made up. And it's just, I'm learning how to effectively push back to that. It's very different than anything else in my life. Usually facts and data is what works, but.
More
And Dan,
power
really
you.
quickly before I have to hop off, and sorry, I got to hop off early, but duty calls,
Sure.
and I gotta make sure that the shenanigans that are going to happen on the floor tomorrow are under control. So just a friendly reminder, you can tune in to the ohiochannel.org and watch session live tomorrow. It starts at 2. You can also watch all of our committees live on ohiochannel.org. Not only are they streamed live, but they're also archived. So you can go back and watch old ones. You can watch Rep. Baker kick ass and her line of questioning on the anti-trans bill and the health committees. And you can go back and watch Constitutional Resolutions Committee, where we, stuck it to the Cincinnati Right to Life lady who came in there and just spewed so much disinformation that it was honestly made me nauseous. With that said, it may seem like there's doom and gloom on the horizon and that we're just really not making any progress here, but keep in mind that we have, at least on the House side, built a coalition style government, and we have successfully kept this off the ballot for May. We are fighting tooth and nail to keep this off the ballot for August. And we hope, no matter what happens, that everyone comes out and votes in August, if that becomes a reality, to stop this. And then everyone comes out and votes this November when it's an off year, right? We have to make everyone aware that this is the year that we may get reproductive freedom on the ballot, and everyone has to come out and vote again in November too. So stick with us. There's hope on the horizon. Keep us lifted. And I'm going to go and try to convince some folks on the other side.
Good luck. Thank you.
Thank you, Rachel.
Yeah, thank you. Rachel, you said that you've begun to find some ways. What works? Talking to these people.
I think there's a lot of personal relationships, being nice, being friendly, telling stories to people, like that. People are more moved, it seems, by that than actual like data and facts. Like, I'm just used to how the hospital works. And if I bring people a bunch of studies and I could show the data, I can usually, convince people of the right thing to do. This is, it's just so interesting to talk to people who just don't agree on the same level of facts and evidence, and have this kind of conspiracy mindset, like, oh, but we don't know who those doctors are paid for. I'm like, this is a huge randomized control trial put on by the NIH. Like, what do you mean who they're paid for? Like, there's just this really weird distrust of professionals. And then there's people who come in and testify that, all this is made up and fake. And it is very interesting. I will say, like, we're saying all the doom and gloom stuff because it's been a hard couple of weeks, but I would say in general, I'm more hopeful being here than I was before I came. And really just talking to a lot of colleagues on the other side that say, if this comes to the floor, I'm going to have to vote with my party, but I'm happy for you to stall it. Like, I just don't think everyone is all the way on board, but they're not willing to stand up to their party, or, I don't understand, but I think there are more people who are reasonable, and whether they'll help us kind of stall things in committee. So maybe we haven't passed a ton of great Democratic bills, but we have definitely held off a lot of bad stuff. And I'm learning to see that as maybe the victories of this General Assembly, is, you know, holding off some of the really bad stuff until we can get a little more balance in the State House.
Mhm.
So, you know, and talking to people who are not this extreme, you know, it's they're in a hard place, but they're willing to help us stall things. So
Right. Oh my.
I have a
Yeah.
different, like my bar is pretty low.
You'll take anything at this point with them. Huh?
But I've talked with some colleagues that I've found, you know, common ground on other issues, right? And then like one I'm thinking of, for instance, that I've had some great conversations on other things, and then I saw his name co-sponsoring this anti-gender affirming care bill, and I'm planning to try to get coffee with him and just chat about why he put his name on that, and be able to say, like, I work in the hospital, I've been in this clinic, like this isn't happening, you know, and I'm hoping that works maybe more than showing people data, is like saying,
Mhm.
I have been there, I've stood there, I've talked to these patients, I've talked to these doctors. This
Yeah.
isn't happening, you know, and
Yeah.
I don't know. I might be naive, you know, I'm only a couple months in, but I'm gonna try that approach.
Do you ever hear them commenting, one of them commenting, oh, I was really affected by this phone call or this comment or this letter or something like that? Do you ever hear it? Have you ever heard of anything like that?
I've heard people talk about getting lots of calls on things. It seems more that volume and holding up work seems to work. Like if their phones are bogged down, if their emails are bogged up, they seem to be moved sometimes by testimony. Like today we had a couple legislators crying during testimony, and it was really hard to listen to because I don't know that the stories were entirely based in reality. So I think there's kind of that, you know, heartstring testimony kind of thing that gets people. I don't know. It's hard.
Okay.
I'm still learning.
So volume and heart rendering testimony might
That seems
give
to
you
be,
a chance.
and I mean, I also think I agree on the whole, you know, blasting things on social media, writing op-eds. There's a lot of people I think that don't like to be in the spotlight for some of these votes and some of these opinions. So, you know, making sure that people see that the light is on what they're doing. They're not going to do this quietly with no one watching, but we're going to highlight what they're doing and what they're saying. And I think that makes it hard for people sometimes to vote ways that they don't feel. So as much attention as we get on people, I think helps.
Great, great. Any other questions for Rachel here? All right, Rachel, thank you very much. We
Thank you
appreciate
guys
it.
so much. We'll keep
Keep up
the
up
good
the
work.
fight tomorrow.
I
Yeah,
just
keep up
want
the
to say,
fight.
I want to
That's
say,
great.
I think it's very, very important work you're doing. And I hope you don't get too discouraged because we're behind you all the way. And I know the majority are, even though what you're experiencing on a day-to-day basis must make you feel pretty isolated at times.
Well, I think that the you know, I think the votes are going to be disheartening when they fall, that we just are a minority when you come down to it. But I think that even if we don't win the votes, I think it's important that the messages we're saying are being said out loud. In that anti-trans bill, you know, we're sitting there, and the Ohio channel doesn't show you this because it's showing you who's talking, but we're sitting there in a whole room of trans kids and their parents while no offense, an old white dude stands up there and talks about genital mutilation. And I'm like, you know, and there's kids with like tears in their eyes, you know, and so even if I don't convince anyone, I think people need to hear that there's people that hear them, that see them, that believe in them, that respect them. And even if we don't win the votes, there's a value in saying that and in pushing back. And that last week, we're doing it again tomorrow, so I'm in a mood right now. But last week when I left, there was a trans girl who was probably 9-ish, and her mom and sister. And I was talking with a few people, and as I walked out the door, she stopped me and asked if she could give me a hug. And I was like, this is why we do it. I mean, I don't know that I convinced anyone in this room, but she knows someone hurt her, and that there are people. So I think, I mean, I hope we convince some legislators, and I hope we can hold off some of these bills. But in the meantime, there's small wins, and just making sure people know that there's people here fighting. So.
Great. Thank you. We'll
Thank
take
you,
all the
Rachel.
small wins we can get.
Yes.
Thank you
Bye-bye.
all.
You're
Thank you.
wonderful.
Welcome to
Thank
stay
you.
with us. Yeah, you're
Thanks.
welcome to stay with us, Rachel. We'll move ahead with our meeting at this point. I'm going to turn off the recording here. Stop that.
Am I popping off?